Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about tribalism that's practiced by the third world peasant immigrants, and not just peasants, by the way, but the mass trafficking, mass movement of peasants and third world people into the first world, into the Western world, without the consent of the local people, by the way, without the agreement. It's being forced on the Western white population. But when they get to the West, and I'll use Australia as just one example because I've seen it elsewhere, they move into ghettos and immediately behave very tribally. So as they bring all the habits and all the customs and all the attitudes that they had in the third world peasant, dirt poor, basket case shithole that they come from, and they want to replicate all those things in the West when they get here, and even generations on, they're still doing it. So they can be 2, 3, 4 generations born in the West, and they're still behaving very tribally, and they try and keep all the benefits. They want to spend all their money if they possibly can within the tribe, within the community, within the family, and they're happy to take from white people, particularly if it's taxpayer handouts and benefits. They want to take from white people, but they don't want to integrate, they don't want to assimilate, and they will, almost on pain of death, avoid spending money in white-owned shops or businesses and so on, only if they absolutely have to. There's a few things with this, and something that kicked this off was a while ago. There was sort of the media was advising of an impending shortage of certain products in Australia, and I was just happened to be going down to the local grocery store or supermarket that day, and it's got like an open parking lot next to the store, and up rocked a few buses. These are sort of mid-sized buses, that can seat maybe 30, 40 people, that sort of thing. And they turned up, and a few of those, I think it was 3, maybe 4, and out came, they were filled with in this case, Chinese people, all jabbering away in northeastern Chinese dialect, Mandarin, and I speak passable Mandarin, by the way. I was rusty now, but so I could sort of tell where they'd come from. So they arrived en masse, clearly with there was a leader or an organizer there who was barking out instructions, and they descended. There's 2 quite large supermarkets, sort of fairly close to each other, and they descended on the supermarkets with their list of things to buy. So they and I thought, this is interesting. I could see this is going to go somewhere. I'll follow this, and so I sort of followed at a discreet distance just to see what was going to happen. Why would that many people? It wasn't like it was a tour group or on vacation or something. They were moving and with absolute purpose. And the guy who was talking too quickly for me to pick up every word, but he said, as we talked about, or as I told you earlier on, get everything that's there and don't leave anything behind, that sort of stuff. So anyway, they go into the shop and absolutely clean out entire sections, and filling up all the trolleys, going to the bus, coming back, filling up again, this sort of stuff. So it was an organized thing. Now, that's something that we in the West don't do. We've got sort of a view of sharing up to a point, I suppose. If starvation is the thing, then maybe that would be an issue. But we've got a problem with sort of taking the last one. That we want to leave something there for someone else, or I do anyway. And I think most people I know do as well. But these people had no compunction. The collateral damage, that other people may be deprived or go with that's someone else's problem. They were looking out for their tribe, for themselves, their families. That was it. Everyone else could fuck off. And so they just cleaned the place out, loaded up the buses, and off they went. Now that sort of behaviour doesn't happen sort of here in the West. We don't behave that way. But they do. And this is not the first time that I've seen, say, in the early days of the COVID supply chain thing, when toilet paper was going to be in short supply. The same thing happened. Busloads of Chinese, particularly, I don't know why the Chinese in particular, busloads of Chinese appear, and they just grab the. They were cleaning out entire set. They would just come in, descend on the supermarket, and just clean out all the toilet paper, and then just move on to the next one. I mean, they're like a plague of fucking locusts, for Christ's sakes. And they have no compunction in doing it. And that's it. We're looking out for ourselves. But other people might go without, or other. But hey, who cares? We're looking out for ourselves. That's what we do. We're looking out for our Chinese community. That's what we're doing. Our families and our Chinese community. Everyone else can. But this is a white person's country. They let you come here. They let you come here and stay here to study, or as an immigrant, or as a guest. Don't you think that's no? We're looking out for our people. Our people we're looking out for. Now, this tribalism is expressed across sort of various groups, depending on how many of them are brought out en masse to the West. Now, if you get the odd one or two here and there and they're spread around, they can't organise in that way. But when you bring enough of them, and particularly when they're centrally controlled by things like labour hire firms and various gangster goons, Communist Party generals and everything, then there is enough of them here and that level of control. The Chinese in particular, if there's any sort of a demonstration that may be negative towards China here in Australia, they can at the drop of a hat, they can rustle up a counter protesting crowd to disrupt the other protest. They can field a mob in seconds, and they're fairly good at it, and they're well organised with the bullhorns and the transport and the whole thing. It's I'd like to know where the money comes from for that. But anyway, so now this is something that's not just Chinese, the Indians and the Chinese in particular, but you see it at other areas like sections of the Philippine community and that sort of thing. And the Filipinos sort of have a better rate of integration into white society than either the Indians or the Chinese do. The Indians integrate the least. The Chinese aren't that far behind. And I recently took a train ride and through a number of suburbs of an Australian city, and once you get to maybe the outer middle distance suburbs, so say 30 kilometres from the CBD, 35 kilometres, that type of range, maybe a little bit more, but somewhere around there. Then we were going past train platform after train platform where you might see one or no white people in the train carriage I was in. Occasionally, their white person get on and come out get out another stop. But for the most part of that trip, I was the only white person on the carriage. It's insane. But they're all together in groups. So the Indians hang out together, the Chinese hang out together, the Filipinos hang out together, the the Indonesians hang out together, that sort of thing. So all these groups, the blacks, and there wasn't that many of them, but they hung out together. So there was. It's very, very tribal, and they look out for the tribe. Now, they're also very committed to increasing their numbers here in the West, and again, using Australia as an example. So it's the duty of every Indian that comes to Australia to do whatever they can to bring out another Indian to Australia. That's their job. Their job is to multiply their numbers through, procreation one way, but through bringing out aunts, uncles, cousins, nephews, nieces, any relative they can lay their hands on, or relative of a friend. The amount of corruption that goes into this is mind-boggling. Fake labour hire fronts, fake requests for immigrants who have certain skills, and all we're talking as illiterate peasants from somewhere or other. So they're very committed to that. There is an entire industry, a thriving industry in Australia of Indians whose sole job is to bring out more Indians. So whereas the Chinese will try and buy up everything and clean out entire suburbs, they'll target every supermarket in a suburb and just clean it out. and it's very organised again with the buses and the and so on. And the Indians are committed to bringing out as many Indians as they can. Now, both sides, or all sides, are also very committed to genetic purity. So they, and there's always going to be an outlier here or there, but they're very committed to genetic purity. So they only want to marry into their own race and bring out brides and husbands from India in particular and China. So that they're not even happy marrying a local born Indian. Man or woman, that they have to send back to the village to constantly not only keep the genetic pool pure, but keep the culture pure. This is also very important, particularly to the Indians. So really, this is where the West is under assault from these. Now the Indians and the Chinese, are white politicians that are supposed to represent us, by the way, are falling over themselves, tripping over themselves to help both the Indians and the Chinese achieve their objectives of gaining population majority in the West. And the Indian nationalist newspapers and online forums to openly savour and salivate the moment, well, Indians will be in the majority here in Australia and elsewhere around the West. Bear in mind, there are 1.4 billion Indians in the world, and there's not just in that subcontinent. And that's before you count the Pakistans and the Bangladeshis and all that other stuff, which are also you rate in the hundreds of millions, and so. Whereas there's only I don't think it's a billion white people. So they can easily swamp the white population, and they currently are. And our white leaders are helping them and are absolutely falling over themselves to help these Indians and Chinese numerically overwhelm the white people in the West. I mean, fuck, why are they doing this? Why? I mean, the globalists are telling them to do it, ordering them to do it. I get that. But why are you rolling over and just giving up to the globalists this easily? It's insane. I always used to wonder sort of why some countries were so easily, or areas of the world were so easy to invade in centuries past. Is because they were so divided, because they were in the middle of, small petty kingdom tribal warfare type crap. And when nationalism took on, then I took the view as a kid, even reading history and that sort of thing, that the reason this would never happen to the West is because the West would never sell out. We all believed in our country and believed in our institutions, but that hasn't happened. That isn't the case anymore. The globalists have ruthlessly crushed our institutions, including our bodies politic and the courts. They ruthlessly crushed it. So now many people don't believe in it anymore. We don't believe in each other even. They've divided us again, ruthlessly divided us along race, gender lines. And so now many people just don't believe in our country anymore, in our institutions, in that our law is fair and reasonable and just. And clearly codified and applied. We don't believe in those things, which makes us much easier to invade, whether it's clandestine, surreptitious invasions, such as we're seeing with the bringing over the mass migration of peasants to the West, or even if it was something more forthright, such as a military invasion or something like that. But I don't think people are prepared to fight sort of really for something that they no longer believe in. And that belief, that trust, make no mistake, the globalists have stolen that from us, and our own politicians have fucking helped them do it. There's one other point I wanted to make. There's often a claim that Indian and Chinese households have higher household incomes, and thus this proves that they're smarter and harder working, or both than the average white folks or the average local population. I mean, having again travelled the world on business sort of for many years, and having worked very closely alongside Indians, Chinese, and others, if they are significantly brighter than Western people. I don't mean the most dumbass people you can find, like the people that Mark Dice interviews on the, the Californian waterfronts there. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, yeah, can you get that many dumb people? I mean, just as on a random sample, maybe you can. But again, I've worked with these people. If they are that bright, then it doesn't come across to me. And the Indians mostly are so entitled that they're lazy as well. Now, let's separate people who are very good at cramming and swatting for exams, and in that sense, the Asians are quite good at that, and it's very much a part of the culture. In Japan, for example, and I've mentioned this before, there was a guy who perfectly memorized every sound, every musical sound, and every oral sound of 10 Beatles songs. And he had his own act in like this nightclub in Tokyo, and he did these songs, and he couldn't play an instrument, but he'd found a way of going up and down the guitar neck to find the sound that most matched what he heard. Now, he memorized, so we're talking something in the region of 30 minutes, if not more, of music, of singing and playing, and he'd memorized the whole thing down to the tiniest detail. I mean, that's no matter what you think of that, the commitment and the intensity of concentration and so on, it's admirable. I mean, I was like, wow, I was in awe of this guy, absolute awe of him that he could do that. I couldn't do it. I mean, I'm not sure I'd try to do it. I would rather go about another way. I'd learn to play the instrument, and then I'd memorize the words rather than the sound. So I'd go about it differently, and we'd come out at the same point, but having approached it from different angles. And that's part of what this idea that Asians are cleverer than white people, which is bullshit, by the way. Or certainly based on my experience, and I've got a lot of it. Spent a lot of time with them, worked with a lot of them. So it's not sort of a one or two type sample. So we'd go about a different way, but I would learn how to get there with a discipline that could mean I could learn any other song or any other piece of music. But the Japanese guy, well, he couldn't do that. He'd have to memorize every sound. So he'd have to go through this ass-busting ritual to do it. Now, that is a sign of intellectual capacity of one sort, but the way he's doing it is dumb. Whereas, why didn't he learn to play an instrument? The guitar in this case. Why didn't he learn to play the guitar? Learn the chord shapes, learn the melodies, learn how to read music and create. Why didn't he do that? Why didn't he learn English? And then do, that sort of thing. Now, so even though he what he did was very impressive, there's no taking it away from the guy, very impressive. But in my view, it's not a display of practical intellectual capacity. He just swatted and busted his ass at it, and congratulations to him, given the outcome he got. But he still doesn't know. He's still not any the wiser as to how it was done, as in to create and structure it from the ground up, which if you learn an instrument and learn music, you can do. So he and I would have gone about it different ways, but the outcome may have been approximately the same, but not over the longer run. Over the longer run, I would learn 100 songs, and he'd still be stuck at, say, song number 11. I'm trying to memorize every nuance of it. So that would be the difference there, and that's an example on that. But because the Asians have this cramming and swatting thing, and they're very disciplined at it, by the way. I do admire that. I didn't, there's a few. I remember kids from school and college. There's a few of them that I'd categorize as ass-busting swatters and crammers, but not very many. Part of that is the reason I mentioned a moment ago, learning the music. They would learn how it was done rather than just cram the outcome numbers on there, which again the Asians do. So I don't accept that that's an expression of IQ. I don't believe that. So or certainly not in any practical sense. So they cram their asses off and get reasonably good results in the exam, on an average, because there's a smaller number of them, and the ones that have come to the West to go to college tend to be the richer and brighter ones anyway. So, you know, they have access to all resources. So there's a little bit of difference there. Also, when Asians come to the West, Indians too, they often live in sometimes 2, 3, or even 4 generations to a household. So they have all that additional income from all those other people. They've got the grandparents to look after the young children, so they can procreate and go to work full time. The grandparents take care of the children. So this means that the amount of people working in the household and producing an income, the amount of times that the women are not working, involved in childcare, is much less. So they have, you know, if there's 3 generations of, for example, if there's 3 generations of people living in the 5 or 6 bedroom household, then they've got maybe double or even triple the amount of incomes coming in the door as a white household would. So this artificially skews the income coming into the household. Says, well, look how well the Indians are doing. Well, not so much. They've just got more working people in that household, and that's the one. If you look at their per capita income, it's not that good. Now, the other side is saying government jobs, reasonably well-paid government jobs, they give very strict racial priority to people like Indians. So they're gifted jobs that they could not earn in a competitive labour market, And so this, again, artificially skews numbers in their favour. Now, you've also got the Chinese and the Indian. I'm using these two as the examples, given they're the biggest categories of immigrants to the West. But they both have this idea of keeping the money within the family first, within the tribe second, and the racial group third. They will only spend money outside of that group if they absolutely have to. So therefore, if one of their member becomes, I don't know, a mechanic, for example, I'm just using that as well, then they'll all go to that mechanic, even though he might be a crap mechanic. They'll all go to him because he's Chinese or because he's Indian, not because he's the best mechanic around. So the white guy who's delivering the best quality service and the best mechanical repairs will not get their business simply because he's white. And this form of soft, underground discrimination is rampant. Why is it a crime if the white person discriminates against the brown or black person, but it's not a crime if they do it the other way? And it should be. It must be if we're to have a just society. So these are sort of things that go on. This is why the Indian or Asian, wider Asian cramming for exams isn't really, in my view, a measurement of IQ. And if it is, then I don't see it. And again, I've worked with these. I've worked with people who've got, PhDs coming out of their ass, Asian people, Chinese people. And if they are any brighter than any white person, then gee, they're doing a really good job of hiding it because I can't see it. Maybe I'm too dumb. Maybe I'm so dumb that I can't see their brilliance. Perhaps that's the issue here. But I just don't see that. And if they do have a high IQ, then it just doesn't manifest itself in any practical reality that I'm aware of. In fact, sometimes I was confounded in putting language aside for 1 minute. Their English was good enough. Putting language aside, when I'd be having conversations with them and go, okay, well, A, then B, then C. So what follows? This, I'm simplifying a bit here. That wasn't the conversation, but C. Then what comes after C? And they go, oh, bright they are not. Not that they aren't in their own way. They have a certain logic that they can apply to things, and maybe I miss some of that. But that gives you a rounded view. But the tribalism, I think, is one of the greatest, among other things, is one of the greatest threats to Western civilization. And the globalists are cheering it on. And our body politic is doing everything they can to help it along. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.